You are standing here on the frosty ground of Scandinavia 2,000 years ago. No modern cities, no paved roads, only endless forests, icy rivers, and people in whom an unconquerable fire burns. This is the home of the Germanic tribes, our ancestors, who wrote epic stories and shaped the Europe we know today. Back then, the map of Europe looked completely different than it does today. Our ancestors, the Germanic peoples, lived in the territories of present-day Denmark and southern Sweden. Far to the east, the ancestors of the Serbs wandered along the icy banks of the Vistula. And somewhere in Scandinavia, the ancestors of today's Spaniards built their wooden huts, ready for long journeys. These tribes led simple but meaningful lives. They worshipped gods like Odin, the god of wisdom, and Thor, the god of thunder. They held tribal assemblies where men and women decided the fate of their community together. Germanic women were not only guardians of the house, but also advisors and, when necessary, warriors. They believed that every day was a challenge and every challenge a chance to prove one's courage. But then everything began to change. The cold increased, the winters became harder and longer. The soils no longer yielded enough to feed the growing tribes. Historians speak of the first signs of a little ice age, a time when nature forced people to leave their homes to survive, driven by courage and a thirst for adventure. The Germanic tribes embarked on a journey. They did not suspect that their footsteps would change Europe forever. This journey was more than just a fight for survival. It is the story of people who overcame adversity and carried their culture, their beliefs, and their dreams into new worlds. For us Germans today, this is the story of our ancestors, the people who laid the foundation for the courage, independence, and identity of our nation. Join us on this journey to discover how the Germanic tribes from the forests of Scandinavia became the center of a time of upheaval, and how, together with other peoples, they drew the map of Europe we know today. You stand on the banks of the Rhine more than 2,000 years ago. On one side, the mighty legions of Rome, disciplined, proud, invincible. On the other side, our ancestors, the Germanic tribes, wild, freedom, loving, ready to defend their homeland. It is an encounter that will shape the history of Europe, a story of alliances, betrayal, and unforgettable courage. The Roman Empire was a colossus that ruled half of Europe. The Romans called our ancestors barbarians, a word that mockingly imitated the sound of their language. Yet despite their arrogance, the Romans recognized the courage of the Germanic people. They admired their fighting strength and invited them to serve in their armies. Julius Caesar himself established units of Germanic horsemen, and Emperor Tiberius entrusted his protection to a Germanic bodyguard. But this cooperation was not without tensions. The Germanic people fought for Rome, but they remained true to their own spirit. They were not subjects, but warriors who placed their freedom above all else. And so it happened that the relationship between Romans and Germanic people was constantly put to the test, especially when the Germanic people realized that Rome coveted their lands. In the year 9 AD, a man stepped into the foreground who would go down in history forever, Arminius, or Hermann, as we Germans proudly call him. Raised in Rome, trained in Roman war strategies, Arminius turned against his teachers, In the Teutoburg forest, he confronted the Roman general Varus. 3 Roman legions, thousands of soldiers, marched into a trap. The rain, the mud, and the cunning of the Germanic people became their worst enemies. The Battle of the Teutoburg forest was a triumph of Germanic courage. Varus and his legions were annihilated, and Rome withdrew from many areas beyond the Rhine. For us Germans, this battle is more than just a victory. It is a symbol of the unconquerable spirit of our ancestors who defended their freedom against the greatest power of their time. Yet the victory in the Teutoburg forest was only the beginning. The Germanic people remained in motion, driven by a growing population and dwindling land. Some joined Rome, others stood against the legions. This ambivalent relationship between alliance and enmity would determine the fate of a particular Germanic people, the Goths, who would soon enter the stage of history. Come with us on the journey of the Goths, a people who set out from the forests of the north to found kingdoms and challenge the Roman Empire. Their story is another chapter in the great adventure of the migration period. You stand on the rugged coast of Gotland, deep in the heart of Scandinavia, almost 2,000 years ago. Here the Goths, a proud Germanic people, our ancestors, begin their epic journey. With courage in their hearts and the gods Odin and Thor by their side, they set out to conquer new worlds. Their history is one of bravery, adaptation, and the building of kingdoms that would shape Europe forever. In the 1st century of our time, the Goths left their home in Scandinavia, driven by a growing population and the urge for fertile land. On the Vistula in present-day Poland, they met the Sarmatians, a warlike equestrian people. In a series of battles, the Goths defeated their opponents and founded their own kingdom. But the Goths were not just warriors, they were traders, farmers, and craftsmen. They developed a flourishing culture deeply rooted in Germanic traditions. In these years, the Goths began to accept the Christian faith, particularly Arian Christianity, which differed from Roman doctrine. This conversion was not only a religious change, but a sign of their ability to adapt and integrate new ideas. Yet their true strength lay in their warfare. In the year 251, they defeated a Roman army in the Battle of Abratus and even killed Emperor Decius, a shock to mighty Rome. The Goths became a threat that Rome could not ignore. In the year 267, their allies, the Heruli, plundered Greece and burned down Athens. But under King Alaric, the Goths reached their peak. Alaric was not only a warrior, but also a strategist. He led his people to victories, established trade relations with Rome, and brought prosperity to Gothic settlements. In Constantinople, there even served a Gothic guard that protected the imperial palace. The Goths were more than just conquerors. They created a society in which Germanic traditions merged with Roman influences. Their laws, their art, and their faith laid the foundation for what would later become powerful kingdoms. But the peace was deceptive. A new power was brewing in the East, a power that would throw Europe into turmoil. The arrival of the Huns would change everything. They drove the Goths into the arms of the Roman Empire and triggered a chain of events that would rewrite the history of Europe. Join us to learn how this storm from the East shook the world of our ancestors. Enter the vast steppes of the East, where more than a millennium and a half ago a new power rose. The Huns. A people of relentless horsemen whose arrows flew faster than the wind. Their arrival was like a storm that shook the world of our Germanic ancestors and shook the foundations of Europe. Around the year 375, the Huns invaded Europe, a nomadic people whose warfare was so fast and deadly that even the brave Goths trembled. With their mounted archers and their merciless tactics, they defeated the Ostrogoths and forced many of them to flee west, directly into the arms of the Roman Empire. Other Goths submitted to the Huns and were integrated into their armies, while a part fled to Crimea, where they joined Christianity. The Huns were not conquerors who built kingdoms. Their strength lay in their mobility and their ability to spread fear. They united tribes like the Alans and Slavs under their banner and created a force that kept Rome in suspense. Yet their rule was fragile, bound to the leadership of a single man, Attila, who was later feared as the scourge of God. Under Attila, the Huns reached their peak. In the 440s, they carried out raids through the Balkans, plundered Roman cities, and forced Emperor Theodosius Sicu to pay tribute to buy peace. But Attila's ambition knew no bounds. He dreamed of an empire that would surpass Rome. His wars drove the Germanic tribes, our ancestors, into a new era of uncertainty, but also of possibilities. The threat of the Huns forced the Visigoths to ally with Rome to survive. This unusual alliance led to one of the greatest battles in history, a fight that would decide the future of Europe. But why did the power of the Huns crumble so quickly after their peak? The answer lies in their own fragility. The Huns brought chaos, but also change. Their wars weakened Rome and opened the door to new kingdoms for the Germanic tribes, our ancestors. Join us to discover how this storm finally brought down the Roman Empire and changed the world of our ancestors forever. Step into the streets of Rome, the eternal city, in the year 410 AD. Once invincible, Rome is now a wounded giant, weakened by internal disputes and external threats. Our Germanic ancestors, the Visigoths, under their king Alaric, stand before the gates ready to write history. This is the moment when the Roman Empire falls, and the Germanic people, our ancestors, play a leading role in it. The Visigoths, a Germanic people, had years of suffering behind them. Driven by the Huns, they sought refuge in the Roman Empire, but Rome treated them with mistrust and hunger. Alaric, a charismatic leader, had enough. In the year 410, he led his warriors to Rome, besieged the city, and after failed negotiations, stormed it. For the first time in centuries, the eternal city fell into the hands of a foreign people. The Goths plundered, but Alaric ordered churches to be spared, a sign of their Christian faith. Yet Alaric's triumph was short. Shortly after the fall of Rome, he died of an illness. The Visigoths moved on to Gaul and later to Spain, where they founded the Kingdom of Toledo, the cradle of present-day Spain. But Rome was not only weakened by the Goths. Internal crises, inflation, corrupt emperors, and a dwindling army had eaten away at the empire. In the year 455, another Germanic people struck, the Vandals. Driven from their homelands by the Huns, they had settled in Spain and then in North Africa. Under King Gaiseric, they conquered Carthage and built a mighty kingdom. When they plundered Rome, they took everything the Goths had left behind. The term vandalism has its origin in this destruction. But the Vandals were more than just destroyers. They were a people who survived and asserted themselves. The Germanic people filled the power vacuum that Rome left behind. In Gaul, the Franks settled, who would later form France and parts of Germany. The Burgundians founded their own kingdom on the Rhine. These Germanic tribes, our ancestors, were not just conquerors. They brought their laws, their faith, and their culture into the Roman provinces, and thus created the foundation for the Europe we know. But history was not yet over. A last mighty threat was imminent: the Huns under Attila. In an epic battle, Germanic people and Romans would fight side by side to save Europe. Join us to learn the history of this decisive encounter that changed the fate of our ancestors forever. Step out onto the Catalonian plains in the year 451 AD, where the fate of Europe is at stake. Here, in one of the greatest battles in history, Romans and our Germanic ancestors, the Visigoths, unite against a common enemy, the Huns under Attila. It is a moment of unity, courage, and sacrifice that will change the world of our ancestors forever. Attila, the scourge of God, had made the Huns an unstoppable power. After years of looting in the Balkans, he turned his gaze to Gaul. But this time an unusual alliance stood in his way: the Roman general Flavius Aetius and King Theodoric I of the Visigoths. The Visigoths, a Germanic people who had once plundered Rome, now fought alongside their former enemies to defend their new home. The battle raged for 4 days, a chaos of swords, arrows, and screams. Historians estimate that tens of thousands fell on both sides, so many that the chronicles spoke of hills of corpses. The Visigoths fought with relentless courage, but their king Theodoric paid the highest price. He died on the battlefield. His death drove the Visigoths to even greater determination. Yet the battle ended without a clear winner. In the night, the Huns withdrew, weakened but not defeated. The Catalonian plains were not a triumphant victory, but they marked a turning point. Attila's power was shaken, and the unity of Romans and Germanic people showed that Europe could defend itself. For us Germans, this battle is a testament to the bravery of our Germanic ancestors who fought side by side with others to form a new world. From the chaos of this battle, the Germanic tribes rose to found new kingdoms, kingdoms that would take over Rome's legacy and reshape Europe. Join us to discover how our ancestors laid the foundations of modern nations from these ruins. Enter the new world that emerged from the ruins of Rome in the late 5th century AD, where Roman legions once marched. The kingdoms of our Germanic ancestors, the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Franks, and Burgundians, now rise. With their laws, their faith, and their unshakable determination, they laid the foundation for the Europe we know today. This is the story of how our ancestors created nations. After the fall of Rome, the Germanic tribes filled the power vacuum. In Italy, Theodoric the Great led the Ostrogoths to a golden age. He was not only a warrior but a wise ruler who combined Roman administration with Germanic traditions. In Ravenna, he had magnificent churches built that still stand today as testimonies to his rule. His laws, inspired by Roman law, brought stability to a land that had sunk into chaos. In the south on the Iberian Peninsula, the Visigoths created the Kingdom of Toledo. They wrote the Lex Visigothorum, a code of law that combined Germanic customs with Christian values. Their transition from Arian to Catholic Christianity helped lay the foundation for today's Spain. But perhaps the most influential kingdom was that of the Franks in Gaul, led by the Merovingians. The Franks, under leaders like Clovis, accepted Catholic Christianity and united Germanic strength with Roman culture. Their lex salica regulated life from farmers to warriors and became the basis for the laws of the later Frankish Empire, from which France and parts of Germany emerged. For us Germans, the legacy of the Franks is particularly significant. They were the ancestors who paved the way for the Holy Roman Empire and the German nation. These kingdoms were more than just conquests. Our Germanic ancestors brought their language, their customs, and their unconquerable spirit into the Roman provinces. They created a new world in which Germanic and Roman cultures merged, a world that laid the foundation for modern Europe. But the history of Europe was not yet complete. Other peoples, Slavs, Bulgars, Magyars came to leave their traces. Join us to discover how these peoples, with our Germanic ancestors, completed the mosaic of modern Europe. Wander along the Danube, through the forests of the Balkans, and the steppes of the East in the 6th and 7th centuries AD. While our Germanic ancestors founded kingdoms in Gaul and Italy, new peoples streamed into Europe. Slavs, Bulgars, Magyars. Their arrival brought color and diversity to the mosaic of Europe and completed the map we know today. The Slavs, referred to by the Byzantines as Sclavini, came from the forests beyond the Danube. In the 6th century, they settled the abandoned lands of the Balkans, which had been depopulated by wars and the plague. They founded small principalities, including the mighty Great Moravia, which flourished in present-day Czechia and Slovakia. The Slavs were not only farmers, but also skilled craftsmen whose culture came into contact with Germanic neighbors in the West, such as the Franks. At the same time, the Bulgars appeared, a Turkic equestrian people fleeing the Khazars. In the year 665, they settled on the Danube and mixed with the Slavs to found the First Bulgarian Empire. Their warrior culture and their ability to adapt made them a power that even Byzantium feared. Yet it was their fusion with Slavic culture that made Bulgaria what it is today. In the 9th century, the Magyars, another equestrian people, came to the Pannonian Plain. Instead of supporting Great Moravia, they conquered it and founded Hungary. Their arrival marked the end of the Great Migrations, but their wars with the Germanic tribes, like the Franks in the West, shaped the borders of Europe. These encounters, sometimes peaceful, sometimes warlike, created a Europe rich in cultures and stories. The arrival of these peoples was not an end, but a beginning. Together with our Germanic ancestors, they created a Europe where cultures, languages, and traditions mixed. From the Slavic principalities to the empires of the Bulgars and Magyars, each people contributed a piece to the great puzzle. But what did these migrations leave behind? How did our Germanic ancestors and the other peoples shape the world we inhabit today? Join us to discover the heritage of this time, a heritage that lives on in the hearts of Germans and all Europeans. Step through the Europe of today, where the traces of our past are visible everywhere in the stones of old churches, in the languages we speak, and in the borders of our nations. The migration period, This time of upheaval was more than just war and migration. It was the melting pot in which our Germanic ancestors, the Franks, Goths, and Burgundians, together with Slavs, Bulgars, and Magyars, formed modern Europe. The Germanic kingdoms laid the foundation for the nations we know today. The Franks, our direct ancestors, shaped the Holy Roman Empire, from which Germany emerged. Their Lex Salica influenced the laws that later formed German legal culture. The Visigoths in Spain and the Ostrogoths in Italy mixed Germanic customs with Roman heritage, while the Slavs and Bulgars enriched the east of Europe. From these encounters arose a diversity that makes Europe unique. The legacy of the migration period lives on in our language, our traditions, and our pride. The Germanic determination that burned in the battle of the Teutoburg forest or on the Catalonian plains is a part of us, the Germans of today. But this heritage does not belong to us alone. It is a shared legacy that connects all Europeans, from the coasts of Spain to the steppes of Hungary. This is the legacy of the migration period, a story of courage, adaptation, and cohesion. For us Germans, it is a reminder of the strength of our ancestors who formed Europe out of chaos and conflict. Let us honor this heritage by exploring our history in museums, in old cities, or in the stories we tell our children, for in these roots lies the soul of Europe. The history of the migration period lives on in us, in the streets of our cities, in the stories of our families, in the soul of Germany. Let yourself be inspired. Visit the museums. Explore the sites of our ancestors, like the churches of Ravenna or the ruins on the Rhine. Share these stories with your children, your friends, your community. Discover your history, for in it lies the strength of our people.